Hello everyone, this is a live stream, Commodity Supply Chain Management, Week 2. And today we're talking about inventory for supply chains. And I have a chat room, and if anyone has any questions, it's like a lecture, you can post them and I can answer them if I can. I will. And today we'll look at inventory, and let's see where we are in the syllabus. Coming down to the schedule, we're here at Week 2. Inventory, and then this weekend on Sunday is homework 1. Homework 1 is due. Okay, and then so today we have a live stream, and then on tomorrow evening is a Zoom session. But for inventory, what I will be doing is tomorrow evening at 7, instead of Zoom, I'm going to have a live stream and go over the homework. So you can see how the homework is done. So this week and next week, the homework has some technical aspects to it, and I found that I've learned that it's easier to learn it. I've learned that it's easier for students to learn this if I talk about the material today, and then I go over the homework, and then you start comparing the two. And so I'll be doing that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So that'll be a live stream. So you can tune into that. Okay, let's bring up Canvas. And in Canvas, you see here, I've already posted the homework here. And this is the homework. I'm going to go over this tomorrow night and just go through and not work the problems all the way through to the answer, but show you how to set up the problems, where to find the answers, and work them, and then stop and let you complete them. So I'll help you get started, help you set them up. So I'll do this tomorrow night. But today, I'll be looking at inventory. And just like we had a Zoom lecture here, a live stream lecture video, this will be rendered as a video and put here. Wednesday night, that will also be a video. So now we'll have two. Okay, the lecture today is found in the website under Supply Chain Management. Coming down here, here's Analytics, Commodity right here. Inventory 2020, the Word file. So we'll open the inventory file. Enable editing, let's full screen this. And so let's go through this. Okay, so today I'll be presenting this, and now tomorrow I will be going over the homework to show how it's applied. Okay, so you start with just the takeaways, initial takeaways from each one of these areas. We start with inventory model here, the inventory types management plan that primary for the policy, supply chain, special types of inventory, and then for the inventory management plan, we look at forecasting, distribution, logistics, evaluation, efficiency and cost, sourcing, upstream, policy and control. So this is like just an overview of what we'll be doing today. And then under inventory control, like right here is policy and control. Under inventory control, I'm going to go over the constant demand to go through the definitions and concepts and thinking. Then I move to stochastic demand. The same kind of concepts, but it's a little bit more realistic because the demand is stochastic or random, and show you some techniques. So this is pretty much the classic fundamental inventory control for constant and stochastic demand. And over here is the takeaways. But then for supply chain, I'll go into inventory risk pooling, specifically for supply chains, echelon inventory, or between stages, and then finally ABC classification, which is one of the more popular multi-item inventory techniques. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. Now, the objectives of supply chain management is to balance the high service levels with low cost. Now, service levels means order fulfillment. You have an order downstream, you satisfy those orders with your inventory. So that's service level. You have a high service level, which means you're satisfying the demand. Low service levels means you don't have inventory to satisfy that demand, so the demand goes unmet. But you do that with low cost. So to have high service levels, you'll have a lot of inventory, because the more inventory you have, the better you can service those order fulfillment. But for low cost, we want less inventory, because that inventory costs money. So these are competing objectives. So somewhere you have to find a happy medium. And that happy medium is different for every company, every industry, different outside constraints or challenges. And so that's why you need to understand how you can balance that depending on different types of criteria or challenges, difficulties like a pandemic. I mean, how many people have dealt with a pandemic in the last 20 years? It's been 100 years. Anyway, so that's why you don't just learn how to do it. You don't just do it. You have to learn how to adjust when you have things. Okay, but also you're going to emphasize continual improvement. You'll always keep improving. Okay, let's get into it. Let me start with some definitions. Here is my model. Here's my, I say model, but this is really like a graph framework, if you will. So here's a 5-stage supply chain, and I started with a 3-stage, 5-stage, 7-stage. Some of these supply chains have 20 stages and 100 stages. Sometimes it's very large. Flow of material downstream, flow of information upstream. Now I'm taking the distributor, this one stage, and breaking it up into the inventory. So this really could apply to each one of these stages a little bit differently, but nevertheless, these 5 areas are still there. Okay, and here's kind of like my framework for supply chain management for inventory. Okay, first, notice inside this box is how you're analyzing your inventory. Okay, first your demand. Now the demand looks at outside forecasting, and then you're sending your demand downstream, that's distribution. You're ordering it upstream, that's policy and control, we'll look at that today. And then you're receiving it from upstream, and that's looking at sourcing. And so in order to manage the forecasting and distribution, there's where you look at your demand and your order fulfillment here. In order to address the external policy and control and sourcing, you look at how much you're going to be ordering and receiving it and recording it. Now the evaluation here applies to the inventory itself, so you're evaluating all of these. And this delta here is just an evaluation of a parameter, metrics, different way to measure inventory, and we'll look at a number of ways today on how to evaluate inventory. Okay, inventory control. Determine the inventory policies of lot sizing and lot timing that balance the objectives of cost and service levels. And so in inventory control, and that is this up here, placing orders, the lot sizing and lot timing means the lot is how much you order. It's the lot size quantity. I order 100 pounds of wood or whatever, 100 board feet of wood. Lot sizing is how big are you ordering it. Lot timing is when do you order it? How often do you order? So if I order 100 items every week, the lot size is 100. The lot timing is 1 week. And but you do that to balance cost and service levels. Okay, inventory types. The primary types start with raw material, WIP, and finished goods inventory. These are common. Raw material is like if you're making tables and chairs, the raw material is the wood. The finished goods inventory is the final product, tables and chairs. The WIP, work in process, is partially made tables, partially made chairs, wood, and so that is inventory that is not raw material, not finished goods inventory. It's WIP, it's work in process. And so the raw material here, the amount of that is controlled by upstream sourcing. The finished goods inventory is downstream logistics. The WIP is the efficiency of the production process. When the production process is inefficient, then that WIP increases, and that can be very costly. If you have a very efficient, like just-in-time manufacturing, then all of a sudden you become a lean operation, and the WIP is low and becomes low cost and efficient. And so that's part of operations, but we'll be looking at the external primary types of inventory, external up and down the supply chain in this course. Other types of policy types is order quantity and safety stock. In other words, the order quantity is how much you order from the supplier. Safety stock is carrying inventory to guard against stock out. Now, stock out is unmet demand. When you have demand and you can't meet that demand because you don't have the inventory, that's called stock out. Stock out doesn't mean zero inventory. It means you don't have inventory to meet demand. Okay, supply chain types of inventories. Pipeline inventory logistics. Now, in other words, in supply chains, you order something and it's going to be delivered, and sometimes, like in commodities, you're ordering something from another continent, and it'll take months, weeks or months to get here. So when it's en route, when it's traveling in the pipeline or in the barge or the container or rail, that's inventory. Who owns it? Are you accounting for it? And over time, it's going to cost money to manage that. So that's pipeline or logistics inventory. The other is warehouse or centralized inventory, where you have inventory in a warehouse. That's traditional carrying costs within your inventory. But when you have a centralized warehouse, you're going to have a lot of inventory, and how do you manage that? But then you have positioned inventory or decentralized. You might have a central warehouse, but then you distribute smaller inventory levels positioned so you can meet demand, and that increases your service level. Okay, your order fulfillment then is enhanced because you position your inventory. Okay, so there's where you're balancing the inventory cost with service level. Okay, special types, anticipation and speculative. Anticipation inventory is something that is planned. In other words, you plan for seasonality because it's going to happen. You plan for an event because you know it's going to happen. Speculative are things that are necessarily unknown, technically unknown. Like you speculate things that might happen, or you hedge. So that if it does happen, then I'm ready for it. A good example of that is today in the medical supply chain, either medications for the pandemic or respirators for the pandemic. So you see it coming, so you want to hedge to make sure you have enough for whatever might happen, which you don't know what's going to happen. But you can't take the risk of not having what you need to save people's lives. And so that's more hedge and speculative. Okay. Inventory management. To manage these things, you have forecasting. And forecasting focuses on variability. You want to decrease variability to sharpen your forecast. And the techniques is time series analysis, causal analysis, and risk pooling. Now, the distribution of logistics, there you're focusing on service levels. And you want service levels as high as possible. And there's where you have logistics, centralized, distributed, and vendor-managed inventory. Now, the evaluation internally is efficiency. You want to enhance your efficiency internally. That's the goal. Well, two metrics, there's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of metrics. Two we'll be looking at is a turnover ratio, the turnover rate, the turnover index, whatever you call it, and EPP, which is the economic part period. We'll do that today. And then upstream sourcing, you're looking at the contracts. What type of contracts do you have? Is it open contract? Is it an arm's length contract? Is it strict? We'll look at these when we do relationships. And I won't go into the different contracts very much, but I will talk about sourcing. This is more detailed oriented, a little bit more than this than I want to do in this course. Policy and control. So a lot of what we're doing today is right here, and that's why this is expanded. Lot sizing and lot timing, depending on your service levels and balancing the cost, whether single period, multiple period, single item, multiple items, and there's where ABC classification is what I'll be looking at. There's different types of multiple item techniques. I'll be focusing on ABC classification because it's simple, straightforward, very effective, very popular. A lot of people using it. It's not that hard, but I'll enhance it somewhat. Single stage, multiple stage, echelon. Well, the single stage is just to get the definitions, but the multiple stages, echelon inventory, there's where you talk about supply chains. Continuous review systems and periodic, and then deterministic stochastic demand. Now, what's not here? Well, there's some things that are not here that I'm not going to go into, but we could. But I will mention them. Sounds like a lot, and it is. It is a lot. So I really don't want to go into detail on each one of those. I can't. I don't want to be here all day long, and I don't think you do either. So this is a lot of material, but this is, I think, what you need for inventory to have a good appreciation for it. And any one of these areas, you can go much, much, much deeper. So what I'm going to be doing today is going through this, but I want to go through it and highlight the impacts and the takeaways and the application of each of these, not so much the derivations or the details. So I'll gloss over the derivations, gloss over the actual details, and I'll talk about how it's used. Tomorrow night in the live stream, there's where I'll be going deeper and actually working these problems and show you how to work the problems and show you how you can get to that. Because this morning, today we're looking at how to use it. Tomorrow night is how to get the values to be used. Okay. At least that's my design. So I hope this works. Okay. I hope you work with me to make it work. Okay, let's do it. Okay, let's start with a single item inventory, constant demand, called deterministic demand, constant demand. You have the basic inventory model, the lot size Q, how much you're ordering from your supplier, your demand rate, which is constant, and T is your inventory period, which is how many, the time between the orders. Now the reorder point here is going to be, for continuous review, the reorder point is you're going to continuously review your inventory level. Now when that inventory level meets your ROP, then you order Q. So I'm going to be ordering from my supplier. Let's say I'm ordering tables. Okay. That's my inventory, and so I'm look at my inventory levels of tables, and when it hits that ROP level, like 100 tables, boom, I'm ordering Q, and Q's 1,000 tables. I'm ordering 1,000, and now I have 1,100, and then I keep watching that. When that goes away, demand takes away. When it gets to 100, boom, I order another 1,000. Periodic review says, well, T is a time between orders. Like I'm going to be ordering once a week. Okay, so I'm not going to continuously review my inventory. I'm going to review it once a week. So I go look at my inventory. Oh, I need to order this much. I'll order this much. So those are two different approaches that we'll be looking at. Okay. And then the ROP is how you calculate that level. EOQ is how to find a lot size to minimize cost. So there you have your timing and ROP and T, and the lot size Q or EOQ. Okay. Then we're going to move to stochastic demand. And stochastic demand is where your demand, say X, is a normally distributed random variable. Now, stochastic demand can have all different kinds of distributions. Exponential, gamma, Weibull, Gumbel distribution, but usually Weibull. I'm just going to keep it simple and just have a nice bell curve, normal distribution, just to show, again, an introduction to show how it works. Okay, now notice the order quantity here, Q equals DT. When you have stochastic demand, that D is just replaced with the mean. But now the safety stock here is replaced with an equation which has to do with stock out levels, variability of your demand, and the lead time. And then this is for continuous review. Now for periodic review, you have something called a base stock level. Okay, and then we'll do the single period, and then I'll allude to stochastic lead time. And then inventory risk pooling, and then echelon inventory, and then ABC. So this is an overview of what we're doing. So let's get into it. Let's get into some more of the details. Okay, you see here on page 4, we have the basic inventory policy Q equals DT with ROP, and so let's look at these right here. Here are the equations. Okay, my lot size here is Q, and Q can be calculated with the demand times the inventory period, T. For example, if this is my demand, this is my inventory period, both of these are in weeks, then that's my Q. It's real simple, you multiply. My order point is demand times lead time plus safety stock. So my lead time, let's say, is 0.2 weeks, like 1 day, 5-day week. Safety stock is 10. Then the ROP, and notice these are weeks, demand is in weeks. The time units have to be the same. And so we go through here and we have ROP. Okay, well, for the continuous review, my ROP is 118, my lot size is 809. For periodic review, my inventory period is 1.5 weeks, and my lot size is 809. So here are two different ways of representing your inventory policy: how much to order and when to order. For continuous review, how much is ROP? That's when you order. When the inventory drops to 118, order 809. For periodic, every 1.5 weeks, order 809. Now we have a constant demand, so there is no variability here. We're assuming no variability. We'll change that here in just a second. Well, to represent this graphically, we have this something called a sawtooth curve. And this sawtooth curve, as the demand comes, see here's 809, as the demand comes down, and here's a safety stock of 10. When it hits 10, then you're going to order 809, so it jumps up again. Now the lot size is 809. It doesn't come all the way to 0, so when it goes from 10 and it jumps up 809 when you receive 809, so this maximum inventory level then is 819, 809 plus 10. Then it comes down to 10, goes up, down to 10, goes up. And there's my RLP 118. So I continually review this, and when I hit this, boom, I order 809. And then in 0.2 weeks it comes in, then I receive it. Now the periodic review says, I'm starting right here, and every 1.5 weeks I'm ordering 809. So once you start it, then it's consistent 1.5 weeks. Okay, here's the takeaways. Now what I'll be doing today is I kind of talk about the concepts a little bit on the equations, but then down here below, these are the takeaways. These are the takeaways that we learn to remember about this material for supply chains. In a continuous review system, when the inventory level reaches ROP, order Q. In a periodic review system, every inventory period T, order Q. The safety stock guards against stock out, and stock out is an unmet demand. Order frequency is orders per time. Order frequency is the number of orders. Like if this is a week here, if let's say 1.5 times 4, this is 6 weeks. Over this 6-week period, our order frequency is 4. Here's an order, here's an order, here's an order. That's the order frequency. So the order frequency is 4 over the time over 6 weeks. My order frequency over 1.5 weeks is 1. So that's that. Turnover. Inventory turnover is D. In other words, that's how much inventory comes in and goes out of your inventory. So over 1.5 weeks, 809 come in and 809 go out. So my turnover is 809 over 1.5 weeks. Over 6 weeks, it's 4 times 809, whatever that is, 3,236. So, but the turnover rate is the turnover, whatever that turnover is, divided by your average inventory. Okay, so whatever your average inventory is, you divide that into that. Okay, now, what's the implications? Okay, these are principles to remember. These last two are implications for use. Greater turnover rate implies lower inventory levels. Okay, notice the turnover is the demand. That demand doesn't change. That demand just keeps coming. Well, how can you have higher turnover rates? Well, by having lower average inventory. How do you have lower average inventory? You lower your lot size. Okay, so greater turnover rates implies lower inventory levels. The average inventory is lower. Lower investment in inventory. You're not carrying as much inventory. Lower risk of obsolescence because you're getting rid of it fast. And greater quality control. You're only controlling few. You can control a few better than you can control many. And greater production control, because as you produce it, you can evaluate small amounts at a time as you produce these items. However, greater risk of stock out. Any deviation like stochastic demand, all of a sudden you can have stock out. Well, stock out costs, as it has been observed, is much greater than inventory costs. So stock out has a great risk to it as far as cost is concerned, and also cost as far as loss of image, loss of customers, loss of brand, and so you don't want to do that. 2, achieving benefits from increasing your turnover rate by lowering lot size implies good knowledge of demand, lead time, and unit costs. In other words, and we'll see this later in just a minute here, if in order to increase your turnover rate and lower your lot size, you have to really understand your demand well, your lead time well, and your costs. In other words, if you don't know what the demand is going to be, it's uncertain, then it's very, very difficult to lower your lot size because you're going to have stock out. If your lead time has a lot of variability, same thing, upstream to your supplier. If you don't know where your costs are, you're not really sure how to adjust your lot sizes. Okay, so these are the takeaways as we move forward. And I say this, I'll build it more later. Okay. And I'll build some of it right here with EOQ. Now this is an equation, and I want to emphasize that EOQ is not an equation. EOQ is a concept of minimizing cost. There's a lot of EOQ equations. Okay, so if we're looking at costs, we have to define unit costs and then define total costs, like for a time period. And then we want to combine the inventory cost, which is the ordering cost, which is the order frequency times the cost of each order, not the cost of each item, but the cost of each order, which could be number of items. Total carrying cost, average inventory times how much it costs to carry that inventory. Okay, if you add all three of these, I call that total cost. Well, EOQ simply says, let's get an equation for the total cost, and there's a definition, there's the equation. Find a Q which minimizes the cost. So EOQ is a concept of a Q, a lot size that minimizes cost. We want the cheapest Q possible, the cheapest lot size possible. Well, you take the derivative, use calculus, take the derivative, set equal to 0, solve it, and you come up with this equation right here. So here's your EOQ equation. Now it is a Q, but it's a Q that minimizes cost, so it's called economic order quantity. Well, the concept of this equation is in this graph, and this graph is important. And you'll see this concepts from this graph in the homework and the exams. Okay, notice we have the equations up here. Okay, first of all, here's a cost, and here's Q. Okay, and then right here, this line right here, as Q increases, the cost increases. This line right here is really the total carrying cost, because it's linear in Q. Okay, as Q increases, the carrying cost increases, and that's this equation right here for the carrying cost. This line right here, this inverse line, this hyperbola, notice it is a ordering cost because Q is in the denominator. It's reciprocal. Okay, and that's this equation here, which is ordering cost. Now, if you add these two together, this is called the total inventory. I call it the total inventory cost. You add these together, and there's your curve. Well, this is going to be a minimum right here, and that minimum, the Q, which will be a minimum, is EOQ. And the way to find that minimum is that equation right there. So this is what EOQ means in a graph. But there's two or three things here that's important. One, at EOQ, now remember safety stock is 0. At EOQ, notice that these two costs cross. That means the costs are the same. The ordering and carrying costs are equal. Well, that concept drives a lot of techniques in industry. It can drive techniques in supply chain, upstream and downstream. A lot of consultants use this technique because it's very simple and it's easy to apply. And if you're not aware of it, a lot of times you wouldn't know how to do it. But once you see it, it's pretty easy. For example, you go into a company and the company does not know what their unit costs are. I mean, a lot of companies don't know. How much does it cost to carry one item of inventory? I don't know. But I know how much it costs to carry all my inventory. I know that. Okay, good. So they don't know the unit cost, but they certainly know the total cost because that's recorded. The ordering cost, this is in the purchasing department. The carrying cost, this is in the warehouse. So they do have the total cost, but they don't have the unit cost. And so you pick a Q, and the demand, you know what the demand is. You see the demand coming in the door. You pick a Q. You don't know what it is. You pick it. Arbitrary. And after a while, they're going to report the carrying and ordering cost. And if the carrying cost is more than the ordering cost, they're not equal, so it's not Q is not EOQ. The lot size is not optimal. But if the carrying cost here is more than the ordering cost, then you're down here, the Q is too large. Reduce Q, and these costs are going to come together. And then suppose you reduce it down here, it goes the other way. If the ordering cost here is more than the carrying cost, then your Q is below EOQ. It's too small. You have to increase your Q. If you increase your Q, these two costs begin to come together, and when they're equal, that lot size Q is EOQ. So they trial and error, they find what Q is, or something close to it. Very simple. Very simple. And you can do it just routinely. You know, it's not even an experiment. You can do it real time and see how these costs come together. Suppose you did it. Suppose you let's get some numbers here. You did that. You're at EOQ. You know it's EOQ, and then you say, okay. Suppose Q, let's say, was 100 items. So let's say, and let's suppose the total cost up here is $1,000. Well, that means each of these is $500. Well, if this is $500, the total carrying cost is $500, and the Q here is 100, then what's my unit carrying cost then? Well, if this is 500, if this is 100, 100 over 2 is 50. 50 into 500 is what? 10? So my carrying cost is $10 per item per year. So you can pull out the unit carrying cost. Why would you want that? It's a measure of efficiency. You don't want those unit costs to be too large. Okay, is that total carrying cost big? Well, we have a lot of items. Well, how much is it per item? I can pull that out, and now that becomes a metric within supply chains up and down the supply chain. When you see that unit cost enhance, increase, and decrease, there's some inefficiency in the warehouse right there. Same with the ordering cost. You say, oh, my lot sizes, well, how many times did I order that last year? Oh, we have 10 purchase orders. So my frequency here is 10. If this is 500 and this is 10, then what's my ordering cost? $50. Again, that's your purchasing department. That 50 should be relatively consistent. It's going to be variable, but you're not going to go from $50 per order to like $5,000 per order. That's a problem. So those are used for metrics. Okay. The next thing is that what if you're not at EOQ? Do you want to be larger than EOQ or less than EOQ? Well, if you're larger than EOQ, notice that cost increases very gradually. If you're less than EOQ, the cost increases much more, the gradient is much higher. Okay, so underestimating is much more costly than overestimating, and this shows it. And that's why people overestimate. They game the system. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's better than being short, because it's costly being short. It's more costly being short than being long. Okay. Here are the takeaways. At EOQ, for zero safety stock, the ordering and carrying costs are the same. If Q is more than EOQ, the carrying cost is more than the ordering cost. If Q is less than EOQ, the ordering cost is more than the carrying cost. Remember that. That's going to be important. The economic part period. Here's where we can define the EPP. We'll see that below. Here's a good time to introduce it. Below we will see it for we'll see it in the ABC classification. Andrew, no, the F can be measured orders per month, orders per week. It could be, the time could be anything. Orders per year is convenient for a top-down aggregate metric, but this order could be, if you're doing quarterly statements, it'll be orders per quarter. Okay, and so that time can, the time in the denominator can change depending on the use of that metric. Okay, and hey, thanks for asking questions. That's how we learn. Good job. Okay, the economic part period. Okay, here we go. This is going to be important as a metric. The turnover rate and the economic part period; those two go together as two metrics that I am teaching, introducing, covering as important within a supply chain. It's not just about turnover rates. Okay, let's take the EOQ equation. Let's take this equation right here. Let me do this quickly. You can go through this as I go through it. Square both sides. So this is squared. The right-hand side, the square root goes away. Divide through by 2D. EOQ over 2, EOQ over D. The right-hand side is this ratio. Okay. Now, the EPP is defined as this ratio. I take EOQ over 2 in the numerator. I put this in the denominator, so I'll take the reciprocal D over EOQ. I call that EPP because EOQ over 2 is essentially the average inventory when you have zero safety stock. D over EOQ is the order frequency, depending on the time interval of D. And so this is the economic part period is the average inventory per order frequency. And so you see what they're saying, the economic parts you carry per period. And that's how much inventory you need per period to minimize cost. Well, turnover rate wants that average inventory to be small. But if it's small, the EPP becomes small. Okay, but if that becomes small, the order frequency becomes large. And so the EPP gets really small. When the EPP gets small, what happens to the costs? Well, EPP is a measure of cost. Turnover rate is a measure of efficiency. Okay. Well, notice at EOQ, this ratio represents the ratio of the ordering cost to the carrying cost. At the optimal EPP, this ratio equals the ratio of the ordering cost to the carrying cost. And EPP is based on EOQ yields and optimal EPP. So you can calculate this number, whether the lot size is at optimal or not. And so the average inventory over order frequency that deviates from an optimal EPP will increase the total inventory costs. Okay, either larger or smaller, the costs go up. And so you want that EPP to be as close to the optimal EPP as possible. At the same time, you want your turnover. You have your turnover rate. Okay, you want that turnover rate to be high, but you want the EPP to be at optimal. So one's cost, one's service level. So there's your cost and service level, and those are the metrics. Okay. Now let's go to stochastic demand. Okay. Now here's all the equations. I put this up here. This is kind of like a summary of everything we're doing now. There's a lot here. There's a lot. But I'm going to go through and not really derive all this, but I'm going to go through each one of them. Now that I look at this, this is the setup. This is the order quantity. This right here is the continuous review. This is the periodic review. There's a continuous review, periodic review. This is a single period, and this is stochastic demand, stochastic lead time, inventory risk pooling. So this is a summary. Okay. So down here, let's show you the concepts. Okay. Now, when you have something called a stochastic demand, which is probabilistic demand, I'm going to look at the normal distribution, just a bell curve. So the idea here is that X is a demand, and this notation here will be used a lot. I'll use it a lot, and it is used a lot. It's classic. It's traditional. The X is a random variable, and the tilde means it follows the normal distribution with a mean of mu and a variance of sigma squared. And so the mean and sigma squared defines the distribution. And so this expression right here really is saying I have a normal distribution. That's all it's saying. Okay, the mean here is mu, and that's going to be the mean, median, and mode. Okay, this is the random variable, and this right here is called a random variate. Variable, because that really applies to all the values along this line, along this range here. But this is a variate that applies to one point of the variable. Now the subscript is alpha, and that alpha means the probability in this area right here. That alpha is probability in the shaded in this area right here. Now the area is the area under the curve. So the area under the curve is the probability. So when you have, and this is called the tail of the distribution. So the probability in the tail, when that is alpha, and that's the subscript, then the variate is the point on the line such that the probability in the tail is alpha. So that's pretty much that's classic on how it's stated. Now, the standard normal, we can standardize this. We call it a z. That's where the z value comes in, and that's the random variable minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. So the square root of the variance is the standard deviation. But when you do that, the z follows a normal distribution, same, but the mean is 0 and the variance is 1. And so I list it down here. So Therefore, z of alpha, my variate, can be calculated from x of alpha, the variate from the x-axis. The variate on the z-axis can be calculated by that identity. Or I can solve for x and have that identity. So now I have, I have two different identities. One for z as a function of x, the other is x as a function of z. Okay, and we'll go back and forth. Here's why this is important, the takeaways. And that's why I'm doing this. We'll be using these z values. This is the value right here. The stockout level we'll be talking about is alpha. Now the stockout level is defined as the probability of having stock out during an inventory period. That's my definition. You can't tell it here, but I'm going to do that later. But then I'm going to be using this graph to interpret the stockout level for an inventory policy. So the idea, alpha is going to be my stockout level down below here. The service level is 1 minus alpha. So if this area is alpha, 1 minus alpha is the area on the rest of the curve, because the area underneath the curve is 1 by definition. So the stockout level is alpha, the service level is 1 minus alpha. Now, here's the takeaway, and I guess I should double star this baby, because it's important. As alpha increases, if this area increases, z of alpha decreases. Because in order for this area to be bigger, this point right here has to be lower. As 1 minus alpha increases, z of alpha increases. Okay, so the stockout level is inversely related to the z value. The service level is directly related to the z value, because we'll be seeing the z value in these equations below. So remember that. So the service level is directly related to the value of z, and that will be used as interpretation of inventory policies. Okay, so let's now, not only am I concerned with the normal distribution, stochastic demand, I'm also concerned with the stochastic demand during lead time. Okay, now down here we have a continuous review system. Here's my sawtooth curve. It drops to here, and so I know what my demand is over an inventory period, but what's my demand during a lead time? Well, the stochastic demand during lead time is a normal distribution, but the mean is a lead time times whatever that mean is, and the lead times times whatever the variance is. Okay, and so we'll be looking at ROP, the demand during the lead time, not just the demand during some arbitrary time interval, but the demand during the lead time interval. And I'll develop that next. Here we go. Okay, here I have the derivation. I'm not going to go through this. You can certainly do it if you want. And I also show how to actually calculate it. We'll do that. But before I do all that, those numbers, I'm going to talk about the concept. Continuous review system. Here's my inventory level over here. So, and I have a safety stock here, right here. So what happens is that once I receive my order here, this jagged line here is my inventory level, because it's stochastic demand. If the demand's stochastic, it varies. Well, the inventory level is going to vary, because as demand takes out of my inventory, it just goes all the way around. This straight line is the mean, but this is all the way around, right? It's up and down, up and down, up and down. But then when it hits the ROP, boom, I place my order. Well, my inventory policy is 809. Boom. And actually my reorder point is 155. I calculate that up here. We'll do that later. Actually, we'll do that tomorrow night. But here's the concept. So at 155, I order 809. Well, once I place that order's coming. That's a fixed order. That's a constant. It's coming. Okay, But at ROP, that point right there is 155. Well, during this lead time, what would happen? Remember, my demand is a random variable. During that lead time, what would happen if the demand was greater than 155? I'm going to have stock out. So the probability that the demand during lead time, and let me just take the whole thing. So the probability that the demand during that lead time, if that's greater than the ROP of 155, I'm going to have stock out. And this is ROP. Well, that's alpha. That's the stock out level. So the probability you're going to have stock out is called the stock out level. What stock out is when your demand is greater than your inventory. Because if your demand is more than your inventory, you run out of inventory, you can't meet your demand. Unmet demand, that's stock out. So that's a probability. Okay? And so from this, again up here I derive it, from this we can calculate what our safety stock is going to be. Okay. And the safety stock from this derivation is given by this equation right here. Okay, here's the takeaways. The stock out level, the stock out level, there we go. The stock out level equals 1 minus the service level. And the stock out level is defined as a probability that the demand during lead time is greater than the ROP. As the safety stock increases, the service level increases and the stock out level decreases. As the safety stock increases, the inventory cost increases because you're carrying more inventory, but the stock out costs decrease because the probability of stock out decreases. Now, an optimal safety stock is at break even between the inventory cost and stock out cost. And there you go. So as the safety stock increases, you carry more inventory, the inventory cost goes up, but the stock out costs go down. The break even is the optimal safety stock. Conceptually, that's what we're doing. Well, from that, I go through my derivation up here, and I come up with this equation. Now, the derivation is not important. The equation is important because you have takeaways here. The safety stock will increase as the service level increases. Remember that? If the service level increases, then Z increases. Okay, and if Z increases, then the safety stock increases. Okay, and your service level increases. If the demand variability increases, or lead time increases, so if the service level increases, Z increases. Let me say this better. If the lead time increases, if the variability of your demand increases, or if Z increases, which means your service level increases, then the safety stock is going to increase. So the safety stock is directly related to the service level, the variability in your demand, and the lead time. The service level, the variability or uncertainty of your demand, and the lead time. The safety stock is directly related to that. Okay. Reducing cost must balance service levels with demand variability and lead time. Manage demand variability. How do we manage the variability? Risk pooling and forecasting techniques. Risk pooling has to do with the logistics. Forecasting has to do with lowering the variability. The better forecasting techniques, you have better estimates of your demand. Manage your lead times. How do you manage your lead times? Okay, first of all, demand variability. I'm talking about this right here. How do we manage that? risk pooling with logistics, forecasting techniques with statistics. How do we manage our lead time here? Centralizing your information, electronic ordering, information sharing, and vendor managed inventory. If you can control it from upstream, you can lower the lead time because the information is immediate. Okay. Now, when is this used? Well, the continuous review is used for computerized monitoring. For example, when you have a low mean but high variability in your inventory demand. If it's a low mean, it's not low mean but a high variability, you have to stay on top of it. You have to monitor it all the time. The variability is so high. And if it's a low mean, then you're going to be running out a lot, especially because you have high variability. Okay, you don't want to order a lot because you're carrying it all the time because the mean is low. The variability is high, so the risk of stock out is high, so you want to continuously review it. And there's where you have computerized monitoring and stay on top of it, and your frequency becomes much higher. Order frequency becomes higher. That's when you use it. Okay. Next is periodic demand. Okay, down here, here's the concept. Now remember, we have an inventory period T here. So now in periodic, every T time period we're going to place an order. Okay, and so here's the idea. With the periodic review system, we use something called a base stock level. Now the base stock level is just the level of inventory. It's part of your inventory policy. Let me give you some examples. Suppose a base stock level is 1,000 items. Well, every T time period you're going to place an order. You can place an order lot size Q. Well, how do you determine Q? Well, you know what your base stock level is, 1,000 items. The inventory position, now there's different ways of defining this. The book defines it all different ways. I'm defining it simpler, sometimes too simple for reality, but you can understand the concepts. The inventory position is simply as how much inventory do you have at that time. Suppose we're ordering every Friday we're ordering. So our inventory period is 1 week, every Friday. So Friday, we look at our inventory. Oh, inventory position, how much inventory we have? Look, whoa, we have 100 items in our inventory. What's our base stock level? 1,000 items. How much do we order? Well, we order up to that 1,000 from 100, so we order 900. Okay? And then a week goes by, next Friday, our base stock level is still 1,000 items. How much of our inventory? Oh, our inventory position in a week, it's going to be 200 items. Okay, and so how much do I order? I order 200 up to 1,000, which is 800. So it's as simple as that. So how do you determine this? Well, you know what your inventory period is. That's given. The only thing you calculate is your base stock level. Okay, and down here is the equation for the base stock level. And that is you have the mean of the demand times the inventory period and the lead time. And the safety stock here is the same equation, except we have Z, we have sigma, except instead of just a lead time, we have the inventory period and the lead time. You have both of them. Okay, so you have both the inventory period and lead time, both in your lot size Q and in your safety stock determination. The base stock level increases as the mean demand increases, demand variability increases, lead time increases, inventory period increases, service level increases. So and the point here is that the base stock level gets larger if the mean of the demand increases, the inventory period increases, the lead time increases, the service level increases, the variability increases. I mean, this right here tells you if any of those things get larger, then your base stock level must get larger to have the same to have an efficient policy. Okay. The base stock level primarily addresses service levels, not cost. It's not minimizing cost. It's looking at service levels. It's satisfying order fulfillment. A relationship is observed between high service levels and high inventory levels. That's logical. The higher the inventory level, the better you can service your demand. A relationship is observed between high service levels and shorter lead times. Well, shorter lead times, higher inventory levels, then you can satisfy that very, very quickly then, the downstream lead times. In other words, if you have a demand here, then you can shorten that order fulfillment lead time by having a lot of inventory. It is observed that decreased inventory period can decrease demand uncertainty, resulting in increased service levels. Okay, when your inventory period is smaller, okay, well, the uncertainty of your demand it decreases. In other words, it's much easier to estimate the demand tomorrow than it is estimating the demand in 3 months. The further into the future you have it, and the more you have to estimate, the higher the variability and the higher the uncertainty. That's all that means. Demand variability can be managed through risk pooling. We've already said that. When is this used? When is a periodic review used for the base stock level? When you have an established, consistent monitoring, for example, a high mean, low variability. High mean, low variability, you have a consistent monitoring technique. Low variability means you pretty much know what you're going to need. So you don't have to worry about monitoring it. Just order it consistently, periodically. Okay, so these are the takeaways. By the way, and then we get into risk pooling. These derivations that I'm not really going over, okay, this is a summary of the derivations. These derivations, let's go back to my website. Click supply chain management. Click. Coming down here at the bottom, where are they? There. Here they are. Stochastic demand. Video 1, video 2, video 3. Those 3 videos go through the derivations in detail. And it's illustrated, and I demonstrate it, and I do the equations, and so that's why I don't talk about it. The videos do it. And I'm not going to be asking you to derive anything, but if you're interested, if you are curious or just need to know, I got the videos there for you. Just go through and watch them. Single period and also the base stock level. Okay. Okay, now we're going to inventory risk pooling. Okay. Inventory risk pooling aggregates inventory through upstream centralized inventory to service multiple downstream demand channels. Okay, that simple sentence there simply says, if you have a dual stochastic demand channel, so let's suppose here you have Aurora demand, same inventory item, but you have 2 different warehouses. You have a warehouse on Aurora here satisfying Aurora, a warehouse in Broomfield satisfying Broomfield. Okay, it's the same demand, same inventory items. Well, it's the same inventory items, different. The variability here is a little bit different, but it's the same item, same stock out level. Okay, everything's the same. You say, well, you know, if you pool this inventory into one inventory and satisfy this demand stream from this inventory, satisfy this demand stream from the same inventory, combine your inventories, this can be shown to be much more efficient. Okay, for the same service levels for both your demand streams, the inventory risk pooling will usually lower the safety stock, lower average inventory, lower inventory carrying cost, increase efficiency. So this is seen and can be shown to be more efficient usually than the dual stochastic demand channels. You have a combined channel. Okay. More precisely, consider 2 distinct inventory channels of configuration down here. For the dual channel configuration, X1 and X2 are serviced with two distinct inventories, inventory 1 and inventory. For the inventory risk pooling over here, the configuration satisfy both stochastic demand channels with one combined inventory. Okay. Now suppose the stochastic demand channels follow a normal distribution. So this one is normally distributed with a mean and variance, or standard deviation, and this has a different mean and standard deviation, but it's the same. It's the same item. The mean and variance is a little bit different, but it's the same inventory item. Okay, here's a summary. Suppose each inventory has a 10% stock out level and the same lead time. Now consider the safety stock for each inventory in each configuration. So if I do them separately, I do this separately and this separately, okay, essentially my safety stock in both these inventories, I add them together right here, and I add them together, the lead time's the same, the Z value is the same, my stock out level is the same, service level is the same. My variances is sigma 1 plus my standard deviations are sigma 1 plus sigma 2. Over here, when I pull this down, I combine the two, and what happens is I have a different standard deviation for the combined inventory. Okay. Now before I go on down here, let me show you what I'm doing down here. Now this is page 10. I have an appendix down here. Where do I have the appendix? Appendix A. Boom, boom, boom. Appendix B. Inventory risk pooling. In other words, what I'm showing you here, I go through the derivation. That's why it's an appendix. I go through the derivation. But what I'm showing you, let's see, is this down here. I give an example. So here's my over 8 weeks, let's say. Here's my demand stream. It's random. Here's my demand stream. It's random. But then I combine the two, and I have that demand stream. Well, I take the mean and the variance. I take the mean and the variance and standard deviation of each one of these. I take the mean and variance and standard deviation of the combined. Well, since you're adding them and aggregating them, it's not necessarily going to be the sum. Okay, what's happening here is if I add these together, these sums will be the same. But notice if I add the variances together, that's not the same, and the standard deviations are not the same. Okay, it can be shown they're not the same, usually. Okay. Now the idea here is the variance of the combined will always be greater than the variance of the individuals. But it can also be shown down here below, and I do that. That's what I do up here. I show that the standard deviation of the combined will usually be less than the sum of the standard deviations of the individual ones. And if the standard deviation is lower, then the safety stock is lower, because that's in your safety stock. Okay. Now I say usually, because what happens, let's go back up, this is on page 18, let's go back to 10. Okay. I'll go back down there in a minute. It can be shown that this sigma is less than or equal to the sum of the two. Thus, the safety stock is less than the sum of the two. So therefore, the cost is less, because the inventory is less. Inventory risk pooling will usually result in lower inventory levels for the same service level, or will usually result in lower inventory carrying costs for the same service level. Or for the same inventory level and for the same inventory level, you can have a higher service level. Okay. The lower the correlation between the demand channels, the greater the cost savings. Now what this last one means here, and I derive it down below. Let's suppose that this stream, let's go back down here to the example. Let's suppose these numbers here are identical to these numbers. So they're the very same. If they're the very same, then this over here, these will be equal. These will be equal then, and that's what the less than or equal to means. But if these two are a little bit different, if they're identical, the correlation is 1. If they're a little bit different, the correlation is a little less than 1, then this standard deviation will start being less and less and less. And as that correlation between these, two gets smaller and smaller and lower and lower and lower, then the standard deviation gets lower and lower and lower, and the savings go up. Okay, and that's what this graph is saying. When the correlation here, here's a correlation. When the correlation is 1 here, then the standard deviation savings is pretty much 0. But when that correlation decreases to like they're not correlated at all or they're negatively correlated, what happens is the savings begin to go up. Okay, the savings goes up and up and up and up. Okay, so the takeaway is this. The lower the correlation between the demand channels, the greater the cost savings. So, when you're looking at your demand, you're looking at these different demand streams. The more different they are, the more different you can plot them and see if they're all different. Then by risk pooling, inventory pooling, and centralizing your inventory, the cost savings is more and more and more the more different they are. That's what that means. I took a long time to explain. I could say that a lot more succinctly, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, and I'll be calculating this tomorrow night. Echelon inventory. Now we're looking at multiple stages. Up till now we've looked at one stage. Now we do multiple stages. Now echelon inventory, this is not optimal, but this is a way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do this. This is one way to do it. I need to do something here real quick. Okay, so what they do here is change the lead time. And this is one way to do it, a good way to do it. And it has been shown that it's not optimal, but it's reasonable. It's one way to combine the stages. Okay, the echelon inventory and echelon inventory position. Okay, and this is pretty much how they describe it, define it. I mean, and I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go into this too much. This is more details. But I will talk about the echelon lead time. Well, echelon lead time is lead time plus the downstream lead time. In other words, the lead time of stage 1 is the lead time. The lead time of stage 2 is the lead time. The echelon lead time of stage 2 is the lead time of stage 2 plus stage 1. The echelon lead time of stage 3 is the lead time of stage 3 plus stage 2 plus stage 1. And then you do your policy. So the echelon inventory policy is when the echelon inventory position is at or below the echelon reorder point, then you order the appropriate lot size. Well, let me illustrate this. Okay, let me illustrate this with an example. Let the demand here for stage 1, down here at the end for stage 1, be normally distributed, where the 539 variance standard deviation, stock at level is 10%, EOQ is given by that, ROP is given by the echelon lead time. Okay. So here's the demand that's given. Here's the demand mean. Here's the demand standard deviation that's given up here. The ordering cost Now notice the ordering cost for each stage is different, which is probably true. Each stage, the retailer and distributor, their ordering costs are going to be different. The carrying costs are going to be different. Okay, so these are given for each stage. That's no problem. The demand is going to be pretty much the same, we're assuming. It definitely is when you have centralized information. We'll talk about that later. But if you have decentralized information, the demand is going to be changing. There's where the bullwhip effect comes in. We're assuming it's the same to keep it simple. Okay. Now the EOQ here is demand. The square root of 2 times the demand times the ordering cost over the carrying cost, and I do that, and there it is. Now the ROP, the echelon ROP, uses the echelon lead time. Well, the lead time for stage 1, 2, and 3 is 0.2, 0.5, and 0.3 weeks. Now that means the lead time of stage 1 to stage 2 is 0.2 weeks. From stage 2 to stage 3 is 0.5 weeks. From stage 3 to its supplier is 0.3 weeks. So each of these has a lead time, upstream lead time. Okay? So then you say, okay, then my echelon lead time is going to be 0.2, 0.5 plus 0.2, 0.3 plus 0.5 plus 0.2. So this is my echelon lead time right here. So when I calculate my ROP up here, I'm using my echelon lead time each time. See, 1, 1, 0.7, 0.7, 0.2, 0.2. And now I get my echelon ROP, and there's my inventory policy. So that's echelon inventory policies. Well, the ROP is done individually. I mean, the lot size, the EOQ is done individually, but the lead time is changed. Okay? I think the next one is single period. Before we get to single period, let me point something out, a very important takeaway. Notice in the echelon, the only thing that changes is the ROP. Let's back up. Let's back up here to the stochastic here we go, stochastic demand on page 8. Okay, notice what we have here is that the safety stock here, I mentioned if the lead time increases, the variability increases, the service level increases, the safety stock increases. Okay, one thing I want to point out, I forgot to point out back here, and I'll point it out again, is that if the variability increases, your demand becomes uncertain. What do? Do you order more? A common mistake says, if my demand becomes uncertain, the variability gets larger, I need to order more to satisfy that demand. Well, the theory says no. Don't order more, order the same amount, but the variability is greater. But what you do is you order, the safety stock increases, you order sooner. You order earlier. The ROP increases, the lot size doesn't increase. Because the lot size is still up here. The lot size is just the mean times T. The ROP is the safety stock, and there's where if the lead time increases, if the variability is not part of the lot size. The variability is part of the ROP. So when your variability increases, you don't increase your lot size, you increase ROP. You don't order more, you order the same amount earlier. That's how you address uncertainty. You use the time, not the inventory. Okay, now let's go to single item. The single item inventory simply says, single period inventory, simply says, I'm not looking at multiple orders, I'm looking at only one order, like a promotional item. And or down here, you'll order it rapidly changing product design, you have a new product, a variable cost parameters, the cost changed so much, you're just doing it one at a time, or very long lead times. Well, it's so long, by the time it gets here, the next time you order, it's a whole new. So here's when a single period EOQ happens quite a bit in supply chain. Well, the way it's done is pretty straightforward. It's not hard at all. You have your stochastic demand again, but then you have something called your long cost and your short cost. The long cost is, well, if I order too much and my lot size is too large and my demand is less than my lot size, I'm going to have inventory left over, and that's called a long cost. But if I don't order enough, if my lot size is too small and my demand is greater than my lot size, then I'm going to have unmet demand. That's my stock out, and that's costly. I have stock out costs. So long costs are really inventory long costs. Short costs are stock out short costs. Okay, so the derivation is pretty straightforward. Here you have the short cost times the probability of demand being more than your lot size, so this is your stock out level. The long cost, where the demand is less than your lot size, and this is your service level. Okay, the probability of that happening. Okay, you solve for this thing, and what happens here, doing the arithmetic, you have this probability, which is this ratio. Well, this probability is the same as your stock out level. So the stock out level is equal to the long cost divided by the sum of the long cost and short cost together. And this shows you how to determine your lot size Q, which is your EOQ, economic order quantity, for a single period. I can solve this. Now remember, alpha is determined by this equation here. Okay, so the EOQ then becomes the mean plus the z value, where this alpha is calculated by that ratio, times the variability. Problem. Suppose stochastic demand, where the mean is 539, standard deviation is 82. Short cost is 27, long cost is 3. By the way, the short cost usually is much greater than the long cost. It's much costlier having stock out than having you bring down the mean. Here's the equation. Bring down the mean of 539. The z is 1.282. We'll do that tomorrow night. The sigma is 82, and you get your number. It's really straightforward. Okay, so the inventory policy is order 644, and that's the lowest cost. That's balancing your short and long cost. Okay, the last thing I'm going to be covering is called ABC inventory classification. Okay, and because it's very popular, a lot of people are using it. I think my stream was disconnected for a short period of time. If not, we'll cover this tomorrow night too. It's reconnected now. Okay, here's the idea. You have something called a SKU number, a SKU identifier. It's just a identifier, ID. It stands for stock keeping unit. It's usually embedded in the barcode. And I see here this, for some reason, I think usage has an E in there. Usage, annual usage and annual usage. What they do, this annual usage is the actual turnover. It's the dollar amount. For example, suppose my inventory item was my calculator, and over a year, after one whole year, I guess it doesn't have an E. Huh. Over a year, this is SKU 5. And over a year, I had $73,728 come into my inventory, go out in dollars. So this is my annual usage or my turnover in dollars. I rank order it highest to lowest. I divide through by the total and get a percentage. Okay, and then I have a cumulative percentage. Now the reason I do the cumulative percentage, I say, okay, let's come up here and start adding up the percentages to see how many SKUs do I add up such that I get approximately around 80% of the annual usage of my entire inventory. Well, as it turns out, the top two SKUs, SKU 5 and 8, is around 80% of my total asset. So those two SKUs I'm calling my Class A items, because there's 10 items here, and 2 out of 10 is 20% of the items, and 80.9% of the usage. And so those two items have 80% of the dollar value of my inventory. So Class A items, I'm going to focus on those items. I'm going to have a lot of effort on those items. I'm going to make sure those items, I maybe have a contract and spend a lot of effort with governance and overseeing those items. Okay, and whatever's needed, I want to focus on those. Now, the last 5 to 10%, say 5%, is 50% of my items. Those are my Class C items. Okay, and those are called C items. Sometimes they're called staple items. And those are the M&S, material and supplies, things like paper clips and pencils and erasers and material and supplies. Well, usually these are very low ticket items. They have a very low value to the dollar amount to the inventory. So a lot of times you order in bulk. You have a very large lot size. You order in bulk. The inventory period is very long, once every 6 months or something. Usually these have a much higher frequency, once every 2 weeks, once every week, okay, because you want to stay on top of it. Now the B items are in the middle. The B items are not as high as A or low as C. Sometimes you'll have, say, you can order from this vendor a certain amount. You have a credit card, you can order just this much. Maybe you have a identified catalog you can order from. Anyway, there's some control, but not near as much as A, but more than C. And all this is a way to monitor, a way to organize your inventory. How much effort to put on the right items. You don't want to make a mistake of having an Class A analysis on a C item or a Class C analysis on an A item. Now, these 10 items, it's easy to see. Back when I was consulting, I had this one client who had over 200,000 items. You have to have some organized way to manage those inventory items. And you couldn't average all of them the same way. So what do? You focus on the important items and you put more effort there. And the C items, you put less effort. And the B items, you create some type of a policy and procedure. So it's a way to organize your inventory. Okay. So if I reorder this 1 to 10, I take the cumulative percentage here, I plot it here. This curve here, it's easy to determine your 80. Now the 80 at 20, you probably heard of the 80-20 rule. This is called a Pareto analysis. Well, the 80% here, you can see it's about 2 items. The next 10 to 15%, the last 5% here is maybe the 5 items. The next 5 to 10% here, or the next 10 to 15%, 90 to 95% is like 3 items. So when you have 200 thousands of these things, this is more of a continuous curve. And it's easy to identify your A items, B items, and C items. Let's go a little deeper. For the homework tomorrow night, let's do a cost analysis. Assume the unit ordering cost is $40 per order. The carrying cost is 25 cents per dollar per year. We're working in dollars, not items. Dollars. Okay, now what I'm doing here, I have the SKU, the classification is 235. What I mean by classification is 235, is I have 2 items in the A class, 3 items in the B class, 5 items in the C class. So 2 items, 3 items, 5 items, that's my classification. So my class is 235. But then for my A items though, I'm going to add up all of the usage for my A items, add up my usage for my B items, add up my usage for my C items, add those up, and that's my usage for my classes. That's my class usage. That's my classification for my classes. Okay. Now, I have these costs, but let's just evaluate an arbitrary inventory policies of 10, 8, and 4. Now, which represents the annual order frequency for the classes. What I mean by that is 10, 8, and 4 is given right here. So each one of these items is going to be ordered 10 times. Each one of these is ordered 8 times. All 5 of these is ordered 4 times. So this is how much I'm ordering. Well, when you designate an order frequency, that's really your policy. It tells you when to order and how much to order. When to order? Well, I'm going to divide the year by 10. 1/10 of a year, every 1.2 months. How much do I order? Well, I'm going to take this, divide it by 10, and that's my lot size, $9,216, however many items that is. Okay, but if I divide that by 2, that's going to give me my average inventory in dollars. So if I multiply each of these by 10, there's the total number of orders I'm going to have in that class. If I divide this by 10, that's my inventory. Divide that by 2, that's my average inventory for that class. I'm going to do the same thing for every class. 3 times 8 is 24, 4 times 5 is 20. The usage divided by the order frequency divided by 2 is my average inventory. I sum this up, and my total orders is this. My total average inventory in dollars is $63.68. So now I know that my ordering cost is $40 per order. 40 times 64 is $25.60. I know my carrying cost is 25 cents per dollar per year. So 25 cents for each of those dollars is $15.82. I add those together and I get my total cost. But notice these two costs, the ordering cost and the carrying cost, are not the same. My ordering cost is more than my carrying cost. Okay, so that's not optimal. This is not a minimum cost, because at a minimum cost, those two costs are going to be equal. So I'm using EOQ concept with ABC classification. So how do I determine the optimal frequency here? Well, I don't have one, I have 3. And I can do this for all different ways. How can I do that? Again, the derivation is not important. I go through it separately, and I give the result here. The frequency then is going to be the square root of the usage down here, divided by 2 times the number of the in the classification, 2, 3, and 5, 2, 3, 5, times the EPP, the ordering cost over the carrying cost. So that's 40 over 25, which is 160. I do the calculations, gets 12, 4, and 2. So what happens here, if I go through this same analysis, notice what I have here. Those costs are the same, so that's minimum. If you deviate from this order frequency, 12, 4, and 2, a little bit, this cost is going up. And you can put it in Excel and actually try it. Trial and error, and it's going to go up. Okay? If this 12 goes to 13 and 14, that's going up. If it goes to 11, 10, that's going up. If 4 changes, goes lower and higher, that's going up. If 2 changes, lower or higher, that's going up. It doesn't go up much, but it's going to go up. So that is a minimum. Okay? Now, notice, remember, EPP is the average inventory divided by the total orders. So if I take my average inventory of 3840, divide by 24, I get 160, which is the same as the EPP ratio of the ordering cost to carrying cost. But since this is EOQ, I get that same ratio for every class. This is called an economically balanced inventory. This 12, 4, and 2, since these are all the same, is called an economically balanced inventory policy. But since it's determined by the EPP, it's an optimal economically balanced inventory policy. Okay, so what if you didn't know? You did not know what those were. You didn't know what these unit costs were. It was unknown. So you couldn't do this. So what do? Well, one way is you do your classification, you get your classification, and then look at your A items, and you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, your best effort, and make sure that that number is as accurate as possible. Oops. This is what I want right here. See which I'm doing. In other words, you focus a lot of your effort on those A items. And suppose you came up with this number, whatever it was. And that's the best order frequency you can determine with all of your effort, enormous effort for those A items. Okay? Well, if you know what that is, then 2 times 12 is 24. 92, 160 divided by 12 divided by 2 is 3840. I can divide that and get 160. Then I can take that EPP. Now that's not, this may or may not be optimal. I'm going to call this, notice I'm going to call this an observed EPP. It's an observed average inventory. It's not optimal, it's observed. Actually, let me do this again. Observed. You get the idea. Okay. And I don't know if this is optimal or not, because I don't know what the unit costs are, but I know that this is as close to optimality as I can get, because I put a lot of effort in that 12. So from the A items, I'll take this 160 up here, I'll put it here and calculate the values down here from that EPP. And what will that do? That'll make an economically balanced inventory policy here. It'll be economically balanced. Now the EPP may not be optimal, but it's balanced. So therefore what you're doing is creating efficiencies in your inventory. It may not be optimal, but they're efficient. And so the efficiency is really based on the accuracy of your A items, which hopefully the A items are as accurate as can be, because those are where you have most of your effort. And that's called an observed economically balanced inventory. We'll do that so here, this is extremely practical. You can do this, you can set up your spreadsheets and your code and with Excel, whatever, and notice this can be done at different stages, just like echelon inventory. And this can be done all the way up and down to know exactly how each inventory is balanced with its A items. And you can and also it can be feed up and down your supply chain. So this is very practical, and it's not one item, it's all your items. Okay, so this is probably the most practical way of determining inventory and staying on top of it, balancing it, making it efficient. Okay, and then down here, I talk about item. There's different versions of it. Item, here's economically balanced. I do it again. Then risk pooling, I think that's all I have. Yep. Okay, tomorrow night, some of you, okay, here's the syllabus. Tomorrow night I have a Zoom, but I'm not going to do a Zoom tomorrow night. Well, I am going to do a Zoom, but let me take this out. Tomorrow night I'm going to actually do a live stream tomorrow night. And that live stream tomorrow night, I'm going to be working the homework. I mentioned this at the beginning because the inventory and logistics, more so than others, there's a lot of quantitative, there's a lot of analytics, a lot of Excel. I'm going to go in, and I didn't go through that today, but I'm going to go through that tomorrow night. In other words, what I covered today in inventory is the concepts, definitions, equations, a little bit on derivations on why it does what it does. But then tomorrow night I'm going to do a live stream, and that's where I'm going to work the homework through to the answer, not all the way, let you complete it, but show you how to work it and show you how to apply it. And there's where you can engage the equations and show how to work it. And I'll do that tomorrow night, okay? And talk about the homework tomorrow night. And then after that, then I'll open up after the live stream, I'll do office hours. I'll do a live Zoom. Okay, right after that. Then you can ask questions. We can talk about it. Talk about the course. Talk about the whatever you want to talk about. That's office hours. Okay, so we'll do that tomorrow night to work through the problems. We'll do this probably this week and next week, but then later, then I won't, because a lot of that is not quantitative, it's qualitative, and the live stream on Tuesday probably is adequate. But hey, I'm versatile, I'm agile. Whatever needs to happen, we can make it happen. Let's work together on this to make it work. That's all I have for today. I'll see you tomorrow night on the live stream of the homework. So between now and tomorrow night, I just want to say, and also for the homework due on Sunday, be careful. Stay safe. Don't take anything for granted. Stay safe, because I want you to be here for this whole course so you can learn as much as you can during this time and stay healthy. So I'll see you tomorrow night.